Could it be? But me, your man, Louie T, welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So today's video is about defensive coordinator Joe Whitt Jr. After what we would consider a solid, I think solid is the right word to use. For some of you, subpar might be a more apt term and phrase to describe his first season. You have to remember where we came from as a defense. We were the worst defense in football in 2023, the year before Joe Whitt Jr. and Dan Quinn and company got here. They inherited a really bad group. They overhauled that defense. They filled it up with a bunch of stopgap players, guys that, for lack of a better term, weren't starters, but came here and were thrusted into roles that they weren't necessarily brought here to fulfill. In certain cases, they hit home runs. I knew Frankie Louvu was going to be a star here. Told you guys as much before he got here. I said he's going to become one of your favorite players on this team very quickly with the style that he plays. That's what came to fruition. I knew that Jeremy Chin would fit in here well. He wasn't great last year, right? But he was solid enough, and he helped us when he was here. And so, that was a solid acquisition. You brought in some guys. Dorrance Armstrong was a solid acquisition. And really and Bobby Wagner, of course, that was the extent of good acquisitions last year. From a free agency standpoint, the rest of those guys were, solid, guys that you want on the back end of your rotation. You don't want starting. You don't want Cleveland Farrell starting for your football team. He started here last year, right? You don't want Sheldon Day starting games for you. Sheldon Day started games for us last year, right? Sheldon Day played in a number of games, a high snap count in a number of games. You don't want Carl Davis starting and playing meaningful snaps, over 60% of the snaps in the NFC Championship game. That happened last year. We leaned on guys that weren't even here when the season started, right? So I could keep going on and on and on. We failed at corner with the acquisition of Michael Davis. We kept pushing Benjamin St. Juste. That didn't work. We kept trying to push Emmanuel Forbes. That didn't work. It was a disaster, right? Guys like Noah Igbenogany bailed us out. But again, that's not a guy you want starting, right? But he played massive snaps for us last year and was huge for us a season ago. So I say all of that to say that Joe Whitt didn't necessarily have all of the pieces he needed to put together the product on the field that we would have liked him to. And this was year one, mind you. And I think sometimes what gets lost in the 12-5 regular season finish and going all the way to the NFC Championship game is that we arrived on the scene early. We crashed the party. We didn't even get an invite. We just showed up and became the life of the party, right? But in doing that, you forget this defense was not good the year before. The offense was not good the year before. This team was a disaster the year before they all got here. And so to see the transformation take place, you quickly forget that they weren't supposed to be good last year. We ended up wanting them to be something that they had no business being asked to be. And I know I'm guilty. I can't speak for you because my mindset when Dan Quinn became the head coach of this team and he brought Joe Whitt Jr. with him and he brought some of the guys like Ken Norton with him. And I looked at, what the body of work of those guys and their previous stops, specifically Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. I said to myself, we're going to be good defensively very fast. And I made up this whole fallacy in my mind about how they were going to come in here and they were going to be fast and physical on defense and they were going to create all of these turnovers. And oh my God, this defense is going to be so much fun to watch. And I forgot about a really important thing, a very important ingredient when cooking up a really good defense: talent. Yeah, coaching is important. And this is why I think that Joe Whitt Jr. deserves more credit than he was given a season ago, or if at the very worst, grace he deserves more of going into his second year. It's because he didn't have a lot of talent last year, right? We know this to be a fact. And for him to get this defense to perform the way that it did, despite the lack of talent, says a lot about his ability to adjust and adapt to the pieces that he was given, and his ability to take some lemonades, and not the best lemonades, and somehow still find a way to make a lemonade that doesn't make your stomach hurt, that is palatable. Okay. So I do first want to say about Joe Whitt Jr. that last year was a solid showing from him. For me, I can't speak for you, right? We may not look at last year through the same lens. Look, there are a lot of things that this defense didn't do well. We've chronicled them over the life of, last season through this offseason, and it's well documented. They didn't create turnovers. They couldn't get stops in crucial situations and in late game situations. The fourth quarter was a disaster. They couldn't stop the run. I could go on and on. But the bottom line is, throughout the season, and even with all that being said, this was a team that did enough to win 12 games and make it all the way to the NFC Championship game. And as much as we like to talk about how good special teams was and how great the offense was, we always try to minimize the impact of this defense and what Joe Whitt Jr. was able to do with his unit. And I'm here to say, while I was one of the people saying this defense isn't good enough, which they weren't, and I was one of the people saying this fourth quarter defense and these late game defenses are a joke, which they were, you got to give some credit where credit is due. When we saw bad teams last year, this defense feasted. Okay. That's the sign of a good, well coached team. Because when you see inferior opponents offensively, you scout them, you pick out their strengths, you minimize those, and you force their weaknesses out to the forefront. And that's what we did. Because this is the thing you got to understand. Bad defenses are bad no matter who the opponent is, right? Like, for instance, Cincinnati, their defense was just bad last season. So it really didn't matter who the opponent was. They were going to rack up yards and points, and it was going to turn into a shootout for Joe Burrow in that offense. Didn't really matter who the opponent was because they were bad on defense. You don't blow teams out unless the other team is turning the ball over with a bad defense. You don't. And so you got to give credit. When we saw Arizona, and for whatever reason, they came into that game weary and battered and bruised, probably because they played Detroit the week before. We took advantage of that. We shut them down and we made that game a non-factor by the time we got to the midpoint of the fourth quarter, early stages of the fourth quarter. That game was out of reach because the defense played well in that game. When you look at the Cleveland game, that game was over by the start of the fourth quarter to the point where Jaden Daniels didn't play in the fourth quarter. Why? Because the defense shut down a bad Cleveland Browns offense. That's why. The Carolina game was over before it even got started because the defense got a pick six on the first possession of the game to let that bad Carolina Panthers team that had just scored, 40 points a couple of weeks prior against the Raiders, that this was not going to be your day to be competitive. Okay? And we can keep going. When the Saints had the model Jake Hayner in the game in the first half, they couldn't even move the football past midfield. They were awful. And we were taking advantage of it. That's good coaching, right? No, we didn't have the pieces to be a dominant defense. But when we saw inferior offenses, we didn't allow it to be a shootout. We didn't force our offense to have to go outscore somebody 41-38 or 38-34. We put foot to ass. We put belt to ass, and we said, this game is going to be a blowout because we know what our offense is going to do, and we're going to make sure their offense doesn't match what our offense is doing. You got to give him credit for that, right? And then I'll take it a step further. When we played good offenses, we weren't great on defense, obviously. But when we saw good offenses, we slowed them down enough to the point where our offense had a shot. We didn't win all of those games, but you got to give this defense credit. In the game in week 3 against Cincinnati on the road, you know why we were able to get out to a 27-13 lead? It wasn't because the offense just kept scoring and Cincinnati's offense just magically disappeared. The defense got stops. That's what happened. They got enough stops to allow us to create distance in that game. We were losing 7-0. You don't go from losing 7-0 to all of a sudden winning 27-13. We didn't create any turnovers in that game. It's not like the defense forced 3 turnovers or something. They got stops. They got off the field. The Baltimore game, another example. They gave us chances, especially early in that game when the offense couldn't find its rhythm. The defense kept us in that game and gave us an opportunity. Now, when we need critical stops, which was the theme of the season, we couldn't get them. I thought there was a bogus call in there that hurt us, that would have gotten us a third down stop and gotten the ball back to the offense, but that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is they kept us in that game and gave us a fighting chance defensively against a really good Ravens offense. And we can keep going throughout the course of the season, right? The adjustments were made throughout games. You got to give Joe Whitt Jr. credit for that. There were games where we're getting gashed on the ground, man. I mean, think about the first Philadelphia Eagles game. They couldn't do anything on offense. We were winning that game 10-6 going into the fourth quarter. The Eagles had 6 points. They could not run the football. They could not throw the football. They could not get into an offensive rhythm. We dominated that game defensively for the first 3 quarters of that game. And then the fourth quarter happened, which happened way too often for us in 2024. The Bears game, another great example. It's 9-0 with about a minute to go in the third quarter, and then they rip off the 64-yard run or whatever to DeAndre Swift, and everything kind of changes after that. But the defense was dominant for 3 quarters, basically. Then the fourth quarter happened. I could keep going. There are several games that look exactly like that, or to some degree like that. Or you flip it, right? First half against the Eagles, the second time, you couldn't get a stop. You couldn't stop turning the ball over. Couldn't stop the run, at least in the first quarter. And then systematically, the defense adjusted. You put Deron Payne at defensive end. You get Stouter on the front. Jalen Holmes is also able to get in there. And all of a sudden now you're stopping the run better. You're forcing Kenny Pickett to beat you, which is what you have to do, which is what you got to do when you're playing. It doesn't matter if Jalen Hurts is healthy or not. That's what you got to force them to do anyway. And you're able to hold them to essentially nothing the remainder of the game and give your offense a chance to scratch and claw its way back into the game. How about the first half of the Falcons game, right? I mean, I could keep doing this. The Bucs were the number 1 yards per game offense in the league last season, and they were a top 3 offense were the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year. They scored points. They moved the football. We held them to 20 points on the road in a postseason game. And this wasn't because we were creating a massive amount of turnovers. Yes, the offense was moving the football in that game, and they ate up a lot of clock in that game, and they shortened the game and the amount of possessions. But guess what? We also forced 2 punts in that game and a turnover. Defensively, they got it done. This was a slow start. We failed and turned the ball over on downs twice in that playoff game. We weren't scoring points. And if the defense was giving up points, we probably don't win the game. If they don't come up with that turnover, and it's not our fault that they couldn't hand the football off. The point is, it ended up on the ground. And you know how many times the ball ended up on the ground last year and we didn't come up with it? But we did on that particular instance. This defense made plays. The divisional round forced 5 turnovers. 5, right? Like, we don't do that. Just in case you're wondering, we don't do those things around here. But they did it that night. So it was amazing seeing what this team was able to do. It's amazing. And defensively, they were a part of it. Third down, we were the worst third down defense in 2024. The worst, or 23, excuse me. We couldn't get off the field. We were a joke. We gave up the most deep balls in 2023. Everything and anything that you threw over the top was a catch and usually a touchdown. It was a joke. Tyreek Hill one-on-one with our rookie safety, Quan Martin, and 2-3 steps off the line, he's already got his hand up. Hey, I'm open. Shit was hilarious. To watch them go from that to where we were last year. And remember, we started off the year as one of the worst defenses on third down in NFL history after 2 weeks of football. Really after the first 3 weeks. And then we went from there to probably right around week 12, where we had gotten into the top 10 in third down defensive efficiency. Finished the season at 39% on third downs, which was good for 16th in the league. Are you kidding me? We got off the field on third downs with a less than stellar group, I may add. That's coaching, folks. You can criticize Joe Whitt for the same AA gap blitz and exhausting that to no end, but he did what he had to do with what he had. He protected his corners to a degree, but he made things happen. We had the 8th best sack rate in the NFL a season ago. Yeah, us. Now, take it with a grain of salt. Sack rate percentage is based off of how often you're on the field. We weren't on the field a lot. So by virtue of not being on the field a lot, those 43 or 45 sacks or whatever the number was we had was great for the amount of time we spent on the field, which was not a lot based off of how good and efficient and effective our offense was last season. So we were able to generate pressure despite not having a guy, and we still don't have an elite rusher. Again, that's coaching. We watched games where initially we can't stop the run. The first half of the second Giants game, we couldn't stop the run. We didn't hear a peep out of their run game in the second half. The first half of the Falcons game, we couldn't stop the run. Literally, we were getting gashed. It was the worst. It was the second worst. The first quarter, maybe, first quarter and a half of the second Eagles game was the absolute worst. But the first half of that Falcons game, Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, but mainly Bijan Robinson, were killing us. They had over 100 yards rushing between the two of them. Bijan, I think, had 13 or 14 carries for like 84 yards, 82 yards. I think it was 82 yards. And then Algier had 3 carries for 19 yards. That was in the first half. We shut that faucet off in the second half. They had less carries because they gave it to them. And instead of getting 10 and 8 like they were getting in the first half every time they touched it, they were getting 1 or none or 2, and it was forcing them to have to throw it. And then we were getting it off the field because we were getting stops against Michael Penix Jr. They made adjustments. That's what Joe Whitt did. I'm not telling you it was all great. Not telling you that he did a spectacular job last year, but given the pieces that he had to work with, I think he did as good a job as you can ask a coordinator to do, given the circumstances. And here's the thing that I love. He didn't make excuses last year. He could have. We've sat through defensive coordinators that sit at the podium and make excuses. crap like, oh, well, if you just take away those two big Saquon Barkley runs, I mean, we actually did a really good job against the run. Well, guess what? You can't take those two big Saquon Barkley runs away. Those happened, and you did give up 287 yards on the ground. That did happen. He doesn't make those excuses. We got to be better. We got to produce turnovers. We got to find a way to get stops in the fourth quarter when they matter the most. We have to affect the game at a higher level. These are all things that we saw, and him acknowledging that shows self-awareness. So the question is, will 2025 show off the Whitt factor? I can tell you right now, I'm with it in 2025. Are you? Better pieces. I think the opportunity to really show where he's strong at, because he's got a secondary background. I actually think this is a really good group of corners. Secondary, we'll find out in terms of the safety position, but I think they're going to be just fine on the back end as well. And if I think the biggest thing for Joe Whitt Jr. and his unit in 2025 is, can they stay healthy? Because if Marshawn Lattimore is healthy, if Trey Amos and Mike Sainristil still are healthy, if Quan Martin is healthy, Will Harris comes in and he's healthy and he's what we think he can be in this defense. I can't wait to see what he can do with that secondary, because that's his strength. That's his calling card. Getting guys on the back end to play as one, to attack the football and be aggressive and make plays. You didn't have that ability last year because you just didn't have the horses. You think DaRon Bland's ascension was by accident? No, it wasn't. I don't even think DaRon Bland's a great corner. I just think he was coached up really well and put in positions to succeed. And he has tremendous ball skills. But I don't think he's a great corner. I think you can go at DaRon Bland. I just think he was coached up really well and put in positions to succeed. I think you can see some of that this year. I'm looking for some of that. I'm looking for takeaways on the back end this year from this unit. Because now you've got the pieces. A healthy Jordan McGee changes some of the things you can do schematically. You've got more depth up front. Still missing that one guy up front that teams have to be aware of and game plan to stop. But as a collective group, as a unit, as a cohesive room, that D-line should be good enough to equally stop the run and get after the pass, to where this defense has a chance to be a top half of the league unit as a whole. If this defense overall is 12th in the league, if you're sporting a top 5 offense, which we think we will be, and a top 12 defense, again, there are other factors that play into how's your special teams, right? Are you creating turnovers? Are you turning the ball over? There's other things that can offset having a top 5, offense and a top 12 defense. But if we take care of the football and we're producing more turnovers, and you have a better defense and equal to or greater than offense than the year prior, I don't care that the level of competition is significantly better. I'm just looking at what we can produce, and I'm saying, how are we not a really good football team for the second consecutive year in a row? And that's the challenge to Joe Whitt Jr. and his group on the defensive side, because we know what we're getting out of the offense now. And I thought last year was a solid showing in year one because he did a really good job of adjusting on the fly in games. And he admitted, man, I tried to make the perfect call. Remember, last year was his first time in his career being a play caller. So often we forget about these things because we want what we want. We want instant gratification. We want instant results. We want to see the play on the field match the things that are being said to us. And it just wasn't feasible given the lack of talent and maybe even to a lesser degree, the lack of experience. Well, those things are out the window now. We've got more talent on defense and he's got experience under his belt. So we can expect more from him. I am this year because I think he's a good defensive coordinator. I like the things that this defense did last year. I never once went into a game thinking we don't have a shot on defense, except probably week 3 against Cincinnati. I did go in because we were so bad the previous 2 weeks defensively. We're going to get slaughtered in this game defensively. I was wrong. And that was the beginning of the end of that thought process for me. After that game, I never once went into a game feeling we're overmatched and we can't compete. I never thought we were going to shut a team completely down. I didn't expect us to do what we did to Arizona. I didn't expect us to do what we did to Cleveland. I didn't expect us to do what we did to Carolina. I didn't expect us to do what we did to Tennessee. I didn't expect us to do what we did to the Saints in the first half of that game. I never went into a game expecting us to absolutely shut the faucet off on someone's offense with our defense. But I never went into a game after week 3 thinking we don't have a shot defensively. That's the first time I can say that in probably 2 years that I've went into a game thinking, oh, no. We got a shot to compete defensively. I don't know if we're going to get it done or not, but they're not going to just run over us. Every game in 2023 defensively, we went in thinking just about, oh, we just hope that we don't give up 50 in this game, especially once we got to the back end when they let go of the rope. Just don't score 50 on us, please. We're probably giving up 40. We're definitely giving up 30. Like, we got to a point where it was expected. You don't blow teams out with bad defense. You get into shootouts with bad defense. We weren't in a lot of shootouts last year, folks. Again, you can say what you want about the fourth quarter defense. That's valid. We talked about it. You can say what you want about not producing turnovers. Again, that's valid. We've talked about it. But what we're not going to act like is that this defense was just getting gutted week in, week out. Because that wasn't the case. We went from giving up the most 40-plus point performances in the league in 2023. Did we give up any? Other than the NFC Championship game, obviously. The biggest game of the season. But you can put a lot of that, too, on, the turnovers. You can't do that and expect to come out, on the other. But you don't have to, like, those weren't pick sixes or fumble, scoop, and scores. You could have gotten stops. We just didn't, right? But outside of the NFC Championship game, did we give up 40 at all during the season? I'm just going to go through all the games quickly. Didn't do it in week 1. We got close, though. That's the closest I think we came to giving up 40 in the regular season. I think Tampa got us for 37 in week 1. I don't think in the regular season we gave up more than that 37 we gave up in week 1. Didn't happen in week 2. Didn't happen in week 3. The Bengals did get us for 33 in that game. Didn't do it in week 4, obviously. Not in week 5, obviously. Week 6, the Ravens got us for 30 in that game. Didn't happen in week 7. Didn't happen in week 8 against Chicago. Didn't happen in week 9 against the Giants the second time. Didn't happen against the Eagles in week 10. Didn't happen in week 11 week 10 against the Steelers. Didn't happen in week 11 against the Eagles. Didn't happen in week 12 against Dallas, although that one got crazy in the fourth quarter. How much did we give up to Dallas? They got to the 30s. They did not exceed the 37, I believe. I'm trying to think of what the final score in that game ended up being because it got so wacky in that fourth quarter. Did they score 37 in that game too? They might have scored 38. Trying to think of how many we scored. I think we scored 27. And it was 28 to 27, and then we missed the extra point, and they scored the kickoff. So I think they won by 8. So I think they got to 35 in that game, maybe 36, but they didn't exceed 37. Um, then it didn't happen in week 13, obviously, against Tennessee. Week 15 didn't happen against the Saints. Week 16 didn't happen against the Eagles. They did get to 30 in that game. But again, so no, we could say with 100% certainty, no one got 40 on us. I mean, that's a low bar, but coming from where we were in 2023 and then the lack of talent that existed in 2024, there was no slip up until the NFC Championship game. Um, and we just went through the entire slate. I mean, I think we give up 30 maybe 4 times the whole year. Tampa week 1, um, Ravens, that's 2. Cowboys in week 12. Um, Eagles the second time. That's 4, right? Am I missing one? Well, so Cincinnati, let me go back a little bit. Cincinnati, week 3. Baltimore, week 6. I think you go from all the way from there to week 12 against Dallas, then week 16 against Philadelphia. I think that's it. Quote me if I'm wrong. I might have missed a game, but I think that's the 4 times we gave up 30 plus. Like, it's not like we were getting gouged defensively. So I said all of that to say this, and then we'll get out of here because I don't want to talk your head off. But I really think that Joe Whitt Jr. has a chance to really establish himself as a legitimate defensive coordinator in this league that, will start to garner real interest for a head coaching job with what he can do and showcase in 2025. Because this is still not an elite unit that he's going to be coaching in 2025. It's not. We still don't have a true, legit game-changing pass rusher. Um, our linebackers, look, Bobby Wagner's old. It is what it is, right? Jordan McGee, his health is huge as to what we can do and some of the things we want to implement because he gives us something that we don't really have, you know, which is youth. Frankie Louvu's not old, but you're relying heavily on Bobby Wagner. And so you need the balance of a guy like Jordan McGee to be healthy. You need Marshawn Lattimore to be healthy. You need guys to be healthy and available. And if that happens, Joe Whitt Jr. has a chance to really show what he can do in this league as a defensive coordinator. He thought he was ready over a decade ago when the Packers won a Super Bowl and he was the defensive backs coach. He thought he was ready then to be a defensive coordinator. Took him over 12 years from that point to finally get his opportunity, right? But here he is, and I think he's got a chance to really show what he can do in 2025. I thought he did a lot of good things with not a lot of great parts last season. This defense is improved, and I want to see him as a play caller and as a defensive coordinator. The two are not the same, right? Just as the defensive coordinator, your job is to put guys in the right positions to succeed. As a play caller, that's knowing when to call certain plays at what juncture of the game to then take advantage of you being the defensive coordinator, putting guys in the right positions to make plays, right? So it's two different things. Being a play caller, being a coordinator, right? Coordinator is coordinating where guys line up that best suit their skill sets to put them in positions to succeed. And then the play calling aspect comes in. When do I call up certain plays in certain moments, being situationally aware, understanding the opponent, the down and distance, how to utilize the players that we have, who we're playing against, and how do we maximize what we can get out of this group? Calling the right plays, pushing the right buttons. We can say a combination of the two this season from Joe Whitt Jr. I'm with it. Are you? You let me know. Leave it down in the comment section. It's going to do it for me, your man Louie T here on this installment of the Command Post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Until next time, I'm your man Louie T signing off. See you guys next time. Enjoy the weekend. I'll see you later. Peace. LouieTeeNetwork.